Welcome to Jack's Corner, where conservative values meet national headlines, and truth and reality have a seat at the table. From Louisville, Kentucky, here's your host, Jack Richardson.
Well, folks, welcome back to Jack's Corner, where truth and reality have a seat at the table. And today I want to talk about the fools in Canada and the deadly poison of the left, and one of my favorites, the Kentucky Derby. I'm also going to touch upon the judges again. I can't resist that, having been in the practice of law for 45 years. But I want to talk about the Derby because I'll tell you what, if it's not on your bucket list and you haven't been to the Derby, you got to add it to your list. The Derby is kind of like Mardi Gras on steroids. I mean, it's one of the most awesome events, and you ought to experience at least once. Sovereignty, what a name, what a goal, what a wonderful state of being, and how profound it is that the Derby winner, Sovereignty, beat the favorite horse named Journalism in the 151st Kentucky Derby on Saturday. The Derby winner, not by choice, but chance, has the name that should be symbolic of what we need from the leftist Democrat influence. Now, you knew I was going to spin something in there about the left and the Democrats, didn't you? Well, let me repeat. We need to be free from leftist Democrat influence. It doesn't produce anything good. We need sovereignty from corrupt, inept, visionless leaders as they symbolize everything that is wrong in life. In fact, they are the party of death. Now, I go into that in depth in a lot of other podcasts and articles that I've written. So for now, I want to take a sharp turn back to what was so glorious on Saturday. The winner of the most famous horse race, the 151st Kentucky Derby, was a horse, like I said, by the name of Sovereignty. How apropos. That word means so much to me and should to you as well. Our founding fathers gave that to us, and we have been giving it away to the left and its party, the Democrat Party, with all its freedom, stealing mandates designed to keep them in control and you and this country forever. But then you know that, or at least you should. However, I want to impress upon the people of Louisville and the entire state of Kentucky of the treasures they have. Now, I know this is going to apply a lot to Kentucky, but it's probably going to apply a lot to the states and the cities that you're in as well. In fact, in all the major cities, 50 cities have been controlled and dominated by the Democrats and the left for the last 50 years. And what's happening? They are all crumbling. But back to the point. It's been buried too long, and it has all been because of the rotten politics and placing into office those who thought more of themselves than the people that they were elected to serve. In the 1800s, Kentucky, and particularly Louisville, the financial engine of the state, was one of the most significant cities in the United States. It was in the top 10 with a population of 210,000. It was a manufacturing center and the financial capital for the southeastern region in the country. It was a cultural center, not to mention the crossroads of the country. It's dead center of the country east of the Mississippi and located on the third largest river on the continent. It was a thriving hub and gateway to the south. Now the home of UPS's largest hub, and it's basically to fast food franchising what Silicon Valley is to computers. And there are pages more of unique and significant factors this area plays to the country, to the nation. Now, with the advent of the 1900s, the city of Louisville became captive to a handful of wealthy families who wanted to keep Louisville a controllable plantation town, which it was anything but in the mid to late 1800s. Yes, the concentration of power in the hands of a few, concerned only about their own status, smothered and strangled the growth and kept financing the election of one inept Democrat after another to control the city and the state government. It was not until about 10 years ago that the state legislature became dominated by the Republican Party and began the reversal of a century of stagnation. Unfortunately, Louisville is stuck in the old ways, as so many cities are around the country, where leftist liberal Democrats control. And they stay in power because the simple-minded who outnumber the thinkers and the true progressive. and not progressive in the liberal sense. And they stay in power because the simple-minded who outnumber the thinkers and the true progressives, and I don't mean that in the liberal sense, they keep falling for the same empty promises. Voting a certain way becomes cultural for some. It's easy, and it doesn't require much thought. In fact, none at all. They complain about their plight, but they keep voting the same way. I'm not sympathetic. Not because I'm cold-hearted, but because you cannot enable morons to repeatedly destroy themselves, but worse, those around them, to continue in power and control those who continue to mismanage. But back to the lighter note, on the first Saturday in May, the Kentucky Derby was held as it has been for the last 151 years. It is the jewel not only of the Triple Crown, but of Louisville and Kentucky. It is the largest and most famous of all horse races where breeding, DNA, training, and excellence come together in a most fabulous display. No, it's not metal, petroleum, smoke, and noise so easily and artificially manipulated. It is raw nature in all its glory and beauty, competing with almost always surprising results. Churchill Downs and the track that hosts this major international event is itself beyond description in size and beauty. The complex dwarfs anything else in the world. Its stature is unmatched as only something could, given its performance and history over the last 151 years. I love the iconic twin spires, symbolic of the sport and the pinnacle of perfection and dominance. It's something that few cities can boast of, and those who had the vision and competence to build it into the monolith that it has become today. They have done a great job. If only we could apply those same skills and competence in governing and growing Louisville and the state. The only thing holding us back is competence in government, which has been lacking for 100 years due to voting Democrat as a cultural thing. It's a party that offers nothing of competence, vision, or innovation. Its only skill is maintaining power for themselves, not improving the life of the people who elected them. Under Democrat control, we have chased more business and major companies away because of the short-sightedness of those in control of City Hall. By all measure, given its location geographically and the resources we have, Louisville should have been the Atlanta of the South, with a booming economy and the opportunities available to its citizens that have been denied Louisvillians and Kentucky itself. Due to politics, much opportunity was lost, and that has to end. So coming full circle, I hope that sovereignty, like the horse, will be regained in Louisville, redeeming itself from its past political failures. Churchill Downs should be used as a model and example of what the city should and can be. The city is a marvel and a diamond in the rough, waiting for skilled hands to shape it into the jewel it once was, but dulled by the corrupt Democrat Party who never had an original thought or productive idea of how to advance Louisville or Kentucky for the benefit of its citizens. After watching 147,000 excited visitors this weekend enjoy the Kentucky Derby and viewing a complex that is so large it is difficult to get it into a camera frame, I realized that so much more could be done in this city because of what we already have. We just need to put it to use. We need smart, competent visionaries, not political hacks in government. We need the right people, business people who can forge a path which has in part already been carved out to bring about a great prosperity that can once again be ours. So to my fellow Louisvillians and Kentuckians, think about this the next time you go to the polls and vote. It's time to make us great again. It just takes the right people. Now, are you one of them? It'll depend on how you vote. Now, I want to move on to another really current topic. I want to talk about the Fools of Canada and the elections in Canada of late, which basically was an unmitigated disaster. From Justin Trudeau to the leftist globalist Mark Carney, Canada is doomed. It has always been a riddle wrapped up in an enigma. It never made sense and never will, particularly given the people. According to most surveys, the people are 65% atheist and can't think their way out of a wet paper bag. They go from the frying pan into the fire. There is no free speech or no freedom of religion. The leftists that they voted for took care of their freedoms. So that means the United States has a socialist leader in Mexico whose parents are part of the Mexican Communist Party. And now we have gone from a Marxist Pierre Trudeau to a socialist globalist Mark Carney, who has delivered what looks to be a majority control over the liberals in Canada, who suppress every freedom that is supposed to be characteristic of Western culture. Listen to how absurd the Canadians are. Now get this. They voted for a guy who is a citizen of Ireland and England. He spent most of his time outside of Canada as CEO of the Bank of England and a member on the UN Committee on Climate Change. He's anything but Canadian, anything but conservative, which is the only pathway back for Canada to economic prosperity. And yet, they voted for this guy that's truly not Canadian. How absurd. It's a sad day, and the United States needs to start exercising a better foreign strategy, particularly as it relates to our northern and southern neighbors. We are surrounded now by socialist neighbors, and we must start carrying a very big stick. In fact, I say a club, and make all agreements and relations contingent upon those countries' protection and implementation of Western values and freedoms. If they refuse, then let there be a stiff economic cost to them. We must stop enabling our country being surrounded by the enemies of freedom. Now, Trump's calling Canada the 51st state is not serious, but most people understood that. But I understand the strategy behind it, but I won't get into that right now. I've already talked about it in part in other areas. Canadians' best chance for economic revival was in Pierre Poilievre, but he lost massively, and the Canadians essentially turned to an Irishman, of all things, and a globalist. Just think about it. They turned to an Irishman and who could not be better described other than a pure globalist, not a Canadian. Not even Carney knows who or what he is. He has no allegiances. And what a disaster for this country, if you can even call it that. It's an enigma. As we have seen in this country, people won't change until they suffer enough, and that is what Canadians need. They need to feel the full consequences of their vote and their liberalism. The Canadians, in their pride, couldn't face the reality of their sinking ship, and so they voted for Carney over Poilievre out of anger. That's the old cut the nose off to spite the face. Well, they will justly deserve the economic and societal collapse that will come about, and they likely will face a breakup of the Western provinces from the East, and that would be a good thing. But we in America must take measures to wean ourselves off Canada. We've allowed them and given them too much. We don't need to be collateral damage for the foolishness of Canadians. Trump never wanted, nor does any Republican want, liberal Canada to be a part of the United States. That would be like adding another California to the United States and would destroy us. As far as I'm concerned, let them stew in their own mess. In fact, they are a disgusting mess. My only concern with Canada is it's becoming more socialist and trending towards communism. That is exactly what Trudeau was accomplishing, and he was just following in his father's footsteps. Canada stands a good chance of collapse anyway, and the globalist Carney will not help. He has no love or allegiance to them. He just saw it as another opportunity to add to his resume. We have a problem in our northern border, and once again, it is the leftist contagion that has brought another country to its knees. There is so much that is unaffordable in Canada and for Canadians after 9 years of that girly man Trudeau, and now the people have asked for more, and they got it in Carney. The left are truly the fools of their own folly. I don't want any more states to our nation. And in fact, if I had my wish, I would get rid of some of our states. Let's let Canada have Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Washington. I'd give California its independence and then take it back over as a territory and eliminate the toxic senators and representatives they send to Washington, D.C. Frankly, but for California's economy, there is nothing west of the 100th latitude in the United States. The best of our country lies to the east of that 100th latitude, and that goes down from North Dakota through the Texas Panhandle. Less than 10% of the people, by the way, live west of that line up to the California border. Okay, I know this is straying too far from my main point, but Canada has just sealed its fate with the election of Carney. And unfortunately, we contributed to that and now have to live with it. But the Canadians are not blameless, and I have no sympathy for them. If the country falls apart, I want none of Canada and would only have it as a territory to keep it out of Communist China's hands. Folks, as I've been preaching about this, and people think it's maybe too obsessed with it, but you don't understand in the deep reading and research that's been done and knowing history as I do, the world is a complicated place. And it's not as simple as the legacy media lets you believe or keeps from you. And it's not only a complicated place, but the history has proven 100% of the time that the leftists bring disaster. Yet the people, like dogs, go back to their vomit. Leave them to their misery, but protect yourselves in this nation from being collateral damage. And in closing on this particular topic, given the chaos in the world and the full-on attacks by the left in this country and the danger surrounding us, there is no excuse for any conservative or Republican being idle. This is an all-hands-on-deck situation, and to be AWOL is inexcusable. Now, this will lead me into what I call the historic lethality of the left. But for the children, I would have no sympathy for those suffering who basically supported the left. I'm once again addressing the problem with the left and Democrats because Trump's agenda and plans are working, and that is scaring the you-know-what out of the left. They are currently trying to derail the plans of the president in order to stay in power. They see that what he's doing and the plans that he has made and the agenda he has is going to bring about a strong economic revival in this country. So I'm giving you a heads up once again. The left, synonymous with Democrats, offer you nothing but platitudes, meaningless quips, and empty one-liners like save the planet or tax the rich or hey, hey, ho, ho, Trump's got to go or down with capitalism. That's the extent of the IQ. That's the extent of their thinking and what's going on in that gray matter between their two ears. These little slogans aren't free speech. It's paid for stupidity by non-governmental organizations that benefit from this. And they keep the country in chaos because the only people to benefit by chaos is the left, are the communists, are the Marxists, are the Democrats. The left pay useful idiots, as the communists used to call them, to lead an organized protest based on empty rhetoric. It's a false morality to cover their own hedonistic lifestyles and ideological agenda aimed at a fake utopia. I know I use the word stupidity a lot, but remember, we have to reclaim the glossary from the left by using words that have meaning and depth. And as I have said before, the term stupidity has an element of immorality to it. It has a punch to it. It sends a message. So when I use it, it means I'm referring to those who lack good sense or judgment, also known in the dictionary as idiots. That's a useful word. It used to have an impact. Let's start reclaiming the dictionary that the left took from us. It's almost funny, but folks, it's essentially descriptive, these terms are, these simple terms, and it does communicate a message, and we need to start communicating correctly. The left are also immoral, lacking in intelligence, and many of whom are anarchists who are being paid to create the illusion of strength and support. Look at Bernie Sanders, AOC, Jasmine Crockett, Elizabeth Warren, Hakeem Jeffries, to name just a few. The problem is that so many fall for the slogans and vote for these demonstrably low IQ people. They are the best comedy show in the halls of Russia and Chinese governments. The left in this country worship government, and their policies are disastrous, and we have paid a tremendous price. Let's delve into some of the statistics and examples of leftist policies that have destroyed so many people and nearly our country. Now, I'm going to give you some facts and statistics that you're not going to get from the legacy media. And again, I'm bringing truth and reality to the table so that you absolutely know what's going on, but also the consequences of what the left has delivered to you and the suffering and the misery that they brought. First, let's start with one of the favorites of the left, and that is the minimum wage laws. Now, it is pretty enticing for the have-nots and the lazy, isn't it? and those susceptible to false guilt buy into it all the time. But it's a plan that cripples economies and those just starting out in life looking for their first job and trying to get some experience. So what are the consequences of this? It is proven that if you raise the wages, the employers cut back. Here's some statistics by the great intellect and economist Thomas Sowell. In 1948, black unemployment was 9.4%, below whites, which was at 10.2%. Then in the 60s, the minimum wage increased, and as a result, black teen unemployment rose to 25%. Thank you, the Democrats. Thank you, the left. But we didn't learn anything from that mistake and continued to increase it, and by the 1980s, black unemployment went to 35%. Employers don't hire novices at inflated rates, folks. So what happened? Fast food went to kiosks, and grocery stores started trimming staff, as did other companies. Have you gone into a store lately and have to walk all over the store just trying to find somebody to help you? Thank a liberal for that. Thank a leftist. So it's simple supply and demand. Instead of those on the lowest rung being able to get some experience, either by stocking shelves or doing the menial things and being paid lower wages, at least they were not out on the streets. They were learning and gaining purpose instead of being idle. Now, in the 1920s, blacks outpaced whites in the labor force at 90%. Even in the 40s, it was at 87%, and they took any job. Today, it's down to 67%. Now, let's look at marriage, which was at 61% in 1960, and now at only 32%. You can thank a liberal Democrat. Lyndon Johnson and his Great Society plan was the genesis of a lot of this. Here again, stupid people falling for the same thing for these nothing slogans. They were seduced by the left's sermons preaching that envy was a good thing and anyone who had more than you were to be resented. The Democrats preach and teach envy at every turn, and they want you to be resentful, and they want to divide, and they want to make people hate each other, and they want to create that chaos. Why? Because they benefit from it. The welfare state paid single mothers more than married ones. Now that was stupid. That is exemplary of the left's and the Democrats' immorality, and illiteracy jumped 22%, from 22% in 1960 to 38% by 1970, and now over 70% today. Let's look at another fact. In 1925, the black illegitimacy was 3%. Think about that. The left hates these facts. They need people on a leash to control them. The left is the devil dressed up in compassion. In 1960, 78% of black kids had two parents. Today, only 30%. And that lies at the doorstep of the bleeding heart liberals and the Marxist left. The welfare rules punished marriage, and these rule writers were, you guessed it, the profane, morally bankrupt, God-hating leftist Democrats. I can't say this enough, and I beat that drum, but if you look at the statistics and you know your history, you'll know it to be true. Dependency, which is one of the key things that the left needs in order to continue ruling, surged 100% from 1960 to 1980. Wow, that's astounding. Government doesn't solve poverty. It subsidizes it and places people in a cycle of want. As Ronald Reagan once said, government is not the solution, it's the problem. Folks, that is why I'm so bombastic in my podcast and writings, as so much of the worst worm their way into government and into the bureaucracy. They are either incompetent or implementing a toxic and pathological ideology that is destroying people. But don't condemn them if you are paying for Marxist professors to mentally abuse and indoctrinate your children in schools and universities. You got to rise up and chase them out. Have you ever noticed how the left's solution is to spend more money, and the only thing that happens is things get worse? Well, what did you do about it? Most likely nothing. The left twists facts so that they can stoke your envy. They falsely report statistics in support of their fake rage against inequalities, but bury the truth that in all sectors of America from the 1900s to today flourished. Let's take for an example, the Irish immigrants who were penniless in the 1840s, you know what, 60 years later by the 1900s, They ran New York City and owned establishments around the city. Here's another example. Italians were digging sewers, and that was in 1910. But, just 50 years later, in 1960, their kids built construction firms, and the median income was up 300%. The Chinese started laundries, and now their kids are at the top of the field in electronics and STEM fields, and no one redistributed any money to them. They made it themselves. In 1970, 36% of the households had one earners, and now only 20%. The socialist experiment has caused crime to explode, and to deflect from their failure, the left blamed it all on racism, fascism, white supremacy, and privilege. How much longer are you going to tolerate the left? How much longer are you going to give passage to a corrupt media? How much longer are you going to allow the tyrants in black robes to implement an ideology and call it justice? As Dr. Soul said, the left's equity is a condescending trap. It is a pipeline to failure dressed up as help. Asians marry at 90% and graduate at 95% and outstrip Native Americans. The same goes for Nigerians and so many others that come to this country. So many of these from other countries come here and get rich, while stupid, lazy, leftist voting Americans fall behind. You'd think that after a while they would learn, but I guess it goes like the joke about the moron. It goes, why did the moron keep hitting himself in the head? And he said, because it feels so good when he stops. Well, we have so many moronic Americans, and they're falling behind, and the rest of the world is gaining on us, particularly in this country. The left hates the truth. As I have said, they are the liars, the haters, and thieves, as I've entitled one of my articles. Their only skill is to swindle you into giving them power, whereupon they enrich themselves and rob you of your wealth and opportunity. There is nothing I could say negative enough that would come close to fully describing the malevolence, evil, and suffering the left and the Democrat Party has caused America and the world. All you have to do is take a look at their voting record. Take a look at what they support. It can't be described as anything but. You cannot govern by ideology. There is no utopia on this side of heaven, and there is no excuse for any conservative, Republican, or just a simple common sense person being idle or sidelined, indifferent or intolerant in the fight that we are in for our freedoms. It's time to declare war on the left and their toxic ideology. Go look into the mirror and ask yourself, are you doing all you can? I don't think you will be able to with a straight face. It's time for all hands to be on deck. Time to fight, 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 to keep the Democrats from derailing Trump's plan for American renewal. Now I want to talk about one of my favorite topics of late, and that is judges. Reuters reported back on May 22nd that the U.S. Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson attacked President Trump and his Republican allies, accusing them on comments on judges and saying that they weren't random and that they seemed designed to intimidate the judiciary. Well, while not mentioning Trump in name, she talked about the elephant in the room and indicated that from some legal experts, there was a constitutional crisis afoot. Well, I want you to remind everybody, remember, Justice Jackson, and it's hard for me to call her Justice, couldn't tell us what a woman was in her confirmation hearings. She was silent when Senator Chuck Schumer attacked Kavanaugh and Gorsuch and he used language encouraging violence, saying that if they overturned Roe v. Wade, they would reap the whirlwind. She was silent when other colleagues are threatened, except for now. We do have a constitutional crisis, and it is judicial tyranny and their unconstitutional exercise of power that they do not have. The leftist appointees to the courts that were made by Biden and Schumer are sworn to advance the liberal agenda, not interpret the law. They do not follow the law. Even our greatest presidents of all pushed back on the courts and attacked their impartiality. And I want to make a little aside here. Our forefathers knew that the judiciary was going to be a problem, and they intended it to be the weakest of the three branches of government. And they started experiencing problem with the judiciary back at the very beginning. And a number of presidents pushed back on them. Jackson, our current justice, weighed into partisan politics back on May 2nd. And the bottom line is she is always and has always been devoted to a radical leftism. And that is why Biden picked her. Not because she was a great judge, folks. You have a right to use your First Amendment right to criticize the courts, and they deserve it. But she's trying to make it something more than that, as if they are illegally and feloniously trying to manipulate the court and to change the outcomes of particular cases. Think about this. Above the district courts are circuit courts of appeal, and above that is the Supreme Court. Now listen carefully. Have you any idea how many cases are appealed and reversed across this nation? Even the Supreme Court has reversed itself. How can anyone in their right mind think that these black robe wearing humans are God's gift to the human intellect and fairness? They are so repeatedly wrong because they are, first of all, overrated and woefully ignorant of the duties and parameters of a judge. Secondly, I say that they are undisciplined and cannot rule justly when the outcome doesn't match their ideology. Thirdly, they are not that smart because too many haven't the experience needed, as so many have jumped from their law degree to a judgeship, and that's not an opinion, it's a first-hand experience here. And fourthly, today, and particularly with the Biden and Chuck Schumer appointed judges, they have collectively band together to block President Trump's authority, his presidential and executive authority, and are even assuming the duties of our Secretary of State and other executive branch officials. This is tyrannical, folks, and this must be severely punished by the Congress and the voters. And finally, they are acting unconstitutionally and trying to usurp privileges that belong only to the legislature and the executive branch. It's got to stop. Now remember, just because you wear the robe doesn't mean you are immune from being arrested and prosecuted for violating the law. And we've seen that on a couple of occasions already. The executive branch needs to take that into consideration. Many of the leftist federal judges have malpracticed to such an egregious degree they must be removed from office. They have committed ultra vires by acting beyond their legal power and authority. The problem is they are unaccountable because removal, in a practical sense, is so difficult, and that is impossible, particularly with regards to the impeachment process. The only way that we can correct this is through the legislatures and amendments. The hour is late, and you'd better start banging on the doors of your representatives and senators demanding actions. And if they tell you that they can't do anything about it, then fire them, primary them, and send them packing. Okay, well, I guess that's enough for now, folks. Don't forget to check our website, Bluegrass Chronicles, with over 200 published articles and political commentary and videos. And until next time, I'm Jack Richardson for Jack's Corner.